You're listening to the League Bound Podcast.
Coming again. Oh, mercy.
Your source for weekly coverage on the future stars of the NBA.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship.
I'm your co-host, Jake Schrantz.
And I'm your co-host, Branden Blue.
With production for the podcast coming from Broderick Wilken.
With the first pick in the NBA draft.
Back at it again here in the podcast studio in Anderson Hall. This is the League Bound Podcast, where we break down prospects and the best players in college basketball and talk about breaking news in the college basketball world. I'm Jake Schrantz, your co-host, alongside Branden. How you doing today?
I'm great, Jake. I got to see KU beat Baylor, so I'm on another one today.
100%.
Brody, how you feeling?
I am also doing pretty great. Just got back from my hometown, and I am ready to get this podcast started. What do you say, Branden?
Yes, sir. Let's roll right into it with the negativity segment.
Negativity.
Negativity. Welcome to our negativity section, where we break down any fights, scuffles, and trash talk within the college basketball realm.
Mm-hmm.
And today, it seems that this week, a redshirt freshman from UCLA, Etienne.
Oh, boy.
He got a little heated after the UCLA loss to, I believe, Arizona this week. Wasn't too happy. Some fans were heckling him, and he decided to spit into the crowd. What a bozo. But he ended up getting charged with assault after the game. So that is not fun. Jake, what are your thoughts on this?
Redshirt freshman spitting on the crowd. That you can't really make this stuff up, man. This is just insane. UCLA with a rough week. I guess the state of Arizona basically just owns UCLA.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be a UCLA fan, that's for sure.
What's the news?
And now rolling into our news segment, where we break down any college basketball news. First up, we have Emoni Bates. Reports kind of broke out this week that he wasn't going to be able to play on Thursday, and it eventually later led to reports that he wasn't coming back to Memphis at all. So there was a little bit of drama within the program and on the media about that. But later, his father came out a few days later and said that those reports were not true and that he just had some back problems and that he would be back with the team shortly. I must admit, I was kind of hoping that he was going to leave Memphis because for some reason I just really want to see him play in the G League program. But I don't know about you, Jake. But
yeah, that's kind of interesting. Emoni Bates, I believe a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, he was committed to Michigan State, and then that ended up falling out. And now this season at Memphis has kind of been up and down for him. So it wouldn't really surprise me if he kind of leaves the program, goes somewhere else where he can kind of shine more. I think Jalen Duren has really been their shining star so far this year. But Emoni Bates just continues to be a very polarizing and interesting prospect to look at so far as he's grown up here.
So do you guys think that this kind of media coverage and these reports were kind of a way too quick to jump out and just take assumptions that Emoni was leaving somewhere? Or do you think there's actually some thoughts going on in him with his family and just deciding to go to the G?
I think it was just the gun was kind of jumped a little bit too quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
Plus, I think, there was kind of that factor of we just want to stir up some drama because that program has already had some drama throughout the year, especially since they've been having
We covered that.
Yeah, but, it's one of those things where it's just I think it was just some misinformation, nothing too serious.
Yeah, you really think about it. We already talked about it on the last episode or 2 episodes ago with Penny Hardaway at the media, and then back even with James Wiseman, with him leaving the school early because of some recruiting issues. Memphis has had a lot of kind of strange media coverage so far. It's very weird.
Okay, rolling into our next set of news, we have UCLA, who had 2 crazy losses. Their first loss of the week, though, came to Arizona, at Arizona. The final score was 76-66. They shot 3 for 14 from the 3-point line, which was, I don't know for sure, but that might be their worst shooting game of the season. And then their next loss came to Arizona State, which was actually a triple overtime thriller. The game was wild. Final score was 87-84. Jaime Yaquez Jr. finished with 27 points, but it wasn't enough. And they had another awful shooting night at 5 for 22.
Yikes. I mean, I honestly think UCLA was, even with the returning starters from last year's March Madness team that obviously made that insane run late in the year, I was not super high on them coming into this year just because I think a lot of people forget in that March Madness run, they weren't even a high-ranked seed, and they were kind of the surprise of the year other than maybe Loyola Chicago. Mm-hmm. So I'm not really sure why everyone expected them to be like this top 5 juggernaut all season long when they weren't that at all last year.
I will say at times UCLA does look like a really good team, but it seems like there are also a lot of times when they just seem to fall apart, and it's really just when they have bad shooting nights. And, it's one of those things where you like want to give them the benefit of the doubt and be like, oh yeah, they'll be fine. Come March Madness, they'll be all right. But when you have stretches like this and when you rely so heavily on your shooting, it just gets kind of hard to believe that they can return to the Final Four.
Well, I find that kind of interesting because it kind of does just play into March Madness. I mean, with March Madness in that massive bracket, you just have to be consistent. You can't have a night where you're missing that many shots.
Yeah, for sure.
And, if usually you have, I feel like with championship teams, even if they don't have like the best of nights, they have one thing that, they can consistently help them win games, whether it's their defense, rebounding. They have some sort of identity that they take. And with UCLA, I'm honestly not sure I can really say what that is. But I don't want to hate on them and be like, oh, UCLA is going to be a bust. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a major upset that first weekend of the tournament, whether they lose in the first or second round.
Yeah, and I think this week for UCLA, a 10-point loss to an Arizona Wildcats team that was ranked 7th in the nation at that time. UCLA was 3rd, but I think we can all agree Arizona has been doing really well this season. Mm-hmm. But a loss to a 7-13 Arizona State team, even in triple overtime, like that's really not acceptable if you want to be, considered in that top tier of teams and want to be a number 1 seed in March. I
agree.
All right, so next up on the news, we have Auburn, number 1 ranked ever since, I think, last week or a couple weeks ago. They took on Georgia this week on the road, and they got a 2-point victory, improving their record to 22-1 on the season. But this was a close game, Branden.
Yeah, it was. It came down to the final bucket with that Wendell Green floater. But Auburn was able to hang on. I'm still high on them. I still think they can make a championship run. Next, we have Kansas annihilating Baylor. Let's go. I will give Baylor the credit. They were shorthanded, but all I want to say is Kansas runs the Big 12.
We'll see about that.
We talking that Baylor pack?
Oh, yeah, we are. Very heavy. Next, we have Coach K in his final game at Chapel Hill. He destroyed the North Carolina Tar Heels. AJ Griffin had another great game. My stock-up player last week, 27 points.
He's really been playing well recently. That's pretty scary for the rest of the league.
Yeah. I got to say, Duke has looked like a well-oiled machine. It looks like they're starting to get the pieces back together, and they've been on a stretch where they've looked like a top 5 team again. So I'm really happy about that for them.
The stock market.
Next, we have the stock market.
All right, so here on the stock market, this is our signature segment on the podcast where we talk about some players who we think their draft stock has gone up, and then we also have another player who we think their stock has gone down this week. So for me, my first player for stock up is going to be Cario Oquendo out of Georgia. Over the last 3 games, he had 15 points against Vanderbilt, 17 against Arkansas, and then this past Saturday, he had 25 points in a very, very tough loss to the number 1 ranked Auburn Tigers. That game was insane. I really thought about having KD Johnson and kind of pushing him in for league him this week. Spoiler, he wasn't, but he has been insane this year. I absolutely love the energy he brings for Auburn. Even in that game, if you rewatch it back, he was just getting absolutely booed out of the building. I think he does a great job getting under the student section under their skin a little bit. It's awesome to watch. But back to Oquendo, he really did a great job attacking in the lane. He had a couple jumpers late in the game when they kind of needed that last final push to put the Auburn Tigers away. I believe he had 2 air balls on 2 straight possessions, which that's not really that good. But all around, he was probably the best player on the court other than maybe Katie Johnson and Wendell Green. But I was very proud of what Oquendo was able to do for Georgia, even in a tough season like they've been having. But my second stock-up player this week is going to be Graham Ike out of Wyoming. Finally going to get to talk about him. He had 16 points against Colorado State, who, as I've talked about before on the podcast, they were ranked, I believe, up to 19 this season. And he also had 33 points and 10 rebounds against Boise State and handed Boise State their first conference loss of the season in the Mountain West Conference. He's averaging 20 points and 9 rebounds on the year as a 6'9", 252-pound beast. And Branden, to make you proud, he's even a lefty. How do you feel about that?
You know I love my lefty gang stand-up. But going into my stock-up players, we have some pretty popular players. But first, I have Jaden Ivey, who averaged 21.6 points in 3 games this week. He had a pretty clutch buzzer beater against Ohio State.
Oh my God, that was insane to watch.
Yeah, he's just had some phenomenal.
That was crazy.
He's just had some phenomenal games this week. He's been playing over his averages, and he's also someone I'm excited to talk about here in the future. We'll probably talk about him in the next week or two, and
for sure,
I'll say a lot more about him then. But he's someone I really like. Up next, we have Kofi Cockburn, who he just went crazy on Wisconsin.
That was insane.
37 points, 16 of 19. I'm just gonna leave that there. I really feel like there's not much to say.
You think he's the best center in all of college basketball right now?
I'd probably say so.
So where do you see a player like Kofi landing in the draft? Is he a first rounder?
I wouldn't say he's a first rounder.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He'd probably be a second rounder. I would definitely think he would get drafted just because he has good size. But his game, he's not like the most athletic person. He can't really shoot also.
So he just can't shoot then?
Not really. He's a great player, but he doesn't really shoot a whole lot of threes, and that's fine. He's still a dangerous player on Illinois, so.
That is something that's just so crazy with the NBA now, is that even the centers are expected to just shoot the lights out every night now versus, back in the day, that just was not a requirement.
Yeah.
I feel like Kofi Cockburn, like 20 years ago, 25, probably would be like a top 5 pick, but just nowadays it's not going to be the case.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like the best I see Kofi being is like, I could easily see him being like a really solid big man somewhere, but he'll probably come off the bench and just be a presence in the paint. But next we have our stock down player who, oh boy, JD Davison of Alabama.
JD, man.
Coming into this season, he was 15th on ESPN's top 100, but this week he had games of 0 points and a whopping 7. So, not too great on his end.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about a little bit of one of those games coming up here on League Him against Kentucky. I mean, JD Davison, I wasn't super high on him coming into this year just because of how talented and kind of deep Alabama's guard room is. They already have Javon Quinterly, who has proven that he's a very solid point guard. Shackelford can obviously score the ball. So that kind of takes away everything that they need JD Davison to do, being scoring and playmaking. So he really hasn't had a chance to shine in that role. And honestly, I'll say it right here, I wouldn't be surprised if he just comes back to school this year and maybe even transfers out of Alabama.
Yeah. Especially when you look at this week, even playing number 5 Kentucky and number 1 Auburn, I know a lot of scouts just looking at that aren't too happy with the way he performed. So his stock definitely dropped a little bit after this week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Alabama as a team in those games performed pretty well, right? I mean, did they upset Kentucky? I don't remember which team did they upset.
They upset Baylor, but this week against top 5 teams, they did not have a great outing. Auburn annihilated them. Kentucky
never mind.
was only an 11-point loss. But before this, they did have that identity of being a team who, they're kind of inconsistent, but they really show up against top teams. But this week, that wasn't the case.
And do you think you can put that on JD or the team in general? Was JD a factor in those upsets?
I would just say it's really more the team in general, but I think JD's kind of lack of contribution is something that scouts will take note of, especially since he was at one point a lottery pick this season. So,
yeah, I think as of now, he may not even be in a top 3 to maybe even 5 point guard on a lot of scouts' big boards right now. So he's really going to have to decide whether or not he thinks it's worth it to be maybe a mid to late first rounder or even a second rounder at this point versus maybe staying another year, improving his game, and kind of solidifying himself as a lottery pick.
Performance of the week.
Up next, we have our best performance. Jordan Walker from UAB put up 42 points versus Middle Tennessee. He had 8 3-pointers he took 16 threes, which I think is absolutely crazy, but he hit 50% of them. So good for him.
Hey, if you're on UAB, if you're having a good night, coach is just going to give you the green light. Like, you got nothing to lose.
Yeah, that's just absurd.
Yeah. That's like Steph Curry type of shooting right there.
Yeah. I have a feeling a lot of our listeners may only know UAB for that insane YouTube video when their football program was cut.
Yep.
So here you go. You have another thing to know them from.
League Hymn.
Next, we have our League Hymn player of the week, Oscar Tshiebwe. He leads the nation in rebounds per game at 15.2. Had 4 steals in his last 3 games, 10 points and 15 rebounds versus Alabama yesterday, and 11 points and 17 rebounds versus Vanderbilt. I have to say, I think that a lot of people sleep on Oscar's potential to be a Naismith Player of the Year.
100%. I mean, when you can just absolutely dominate one of the 3 most important kind of factors in a game like Tshiebwe does consistently, like he leads the nation, all schools, even the small schools who may have like a random guy who barely has the grades to play in D1, but he's just insane at rebounding. Even those type of players, he's doing better than in probably what we would say the toughest conference this year in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Doing it for Kentucky. He's easily their best player this year. And, you just got to league a guy like that.
Yeah. Especially another thing I want to say about Oscar is, on paper, his numbers might not jump off, but like it's another thing when you really watch him play and kind of see the impact that he has. He's someone you just have to think about for Naismith.
Honestly, the way he's been playing this year, just look at prime Andre Drummond highlights on YouTube and just put that in college as basically what Oscar Tshiebwe is doing.
Now, will that translate though? Because that kind of comes back to the thing I said, where there's a big difference between racking boards in the NBA and racking boards in college.
That is true.
Basketball.
That is true.
I mean, if it's not going to translate for the nation's leader in rebounds per game, I don't know who it's going to transfer for. Like a guy like Tshiebwe transferring out of West Virginia, coming into Kentucky. It's his first year in Kentucky, and he's doing all this insane stuff. I think there's no doubt he can come off the bench for an NBA team and get you a double-double.
Prospect Breakdown.
It is time. I've been waiting for this all week.
Let's go, baby.
Chet Holmgren, it is your time. I am ready to break you down. 7 foot, 195 pounds, a freshman out of Gonzaga from Minnehaha, Minnesota, played alongside Jalen Suggs, who hit that crazy buzzer beater last year against UCLA.
Mm-hmm. UCLA just getting trashed in this podcast. My goodness.
For real, I feel kind of bad.
They're having a rough week.
I feel kind of bad.
All right, so to start breaking down Chet Holmgren here, we have some great ball handling skills, I think, from Chet. He's had a lot of times this season where he'll just push it in transition, hit it behind the back on a guy reaching on him and just make him look silly. I think he's improved a lot since coming out of Minnehaha. We've seen that this year at Gonzaga. But in the big games against some tougher opponents, like the game against Duke earlier in the year, that was really fun to watch. But I don't think he was really able to carry the full load of the team on his back yet up to this point in his development. He still had 16 and 7 in that game. The 3 turnovers don't help, but I think that may show that looking into the future, he might need a pretty good facilitator at the point guard position to help him kind of carry the load. But I would love to see him play with someone like Isaiah Stewart in Detroit. He's a super risky prospect, but I think if you can bet on that high offensive potential, and I think the defense will translate, like the block shots, I think that's definitely going to translate. But whether or not you think, that frame will be able to handle the physicality of the NBA is still up to be seen.
I hate to say it, Jake, but I think we might have our first little mini disagreement on this.
Okay.
I feel like Chet, this might be a hot take, I can't lie, but I feel like Chet coming into the league, we might see him be a little bit more of a wing player, but that's just me. And the reason I say this is because before I talk about his strengths, I do want to talk about what everybody kind of already knows about Chet. It's his strength and his weight. He has such a great skill set, but when you look at who he's going to be going up against in the league and where he's at now physically, it's just so hard for me to see him banging down with almost 300-pound guys in the league. And he has the skills to be, he's a really comfortable ball handler around the perimeter. So I think that we could see him, be maybe a little bit more of that forward position, kind of like how I see Jabari being a little bit. Mm-hmm. But he can also create his own shot at the 3-point line, which I think is crazy to be able to do at the 3-point line. So that's something that I feel like we might see. But other than that, he has being 7 foot, he has some really good rim protection. He averages 3.3 blocks a game. He's not really the best perimeter defender from what I've noticed, but he has the length to kind of make up for it. Paolo Banchero even said in an interview after the Duke game that, he says he struggled, but I saw some plays where he was absolutely bodying Chet. But he said that he kind of struggled a little bit just because Chet was so long, and I think up to that point he hadn't played a center that was really like as big as him. So Chet did kind of affect his shot, but I think that could be something in the NBA too. Even, if he's not necessarily a post player, he'll still have a presence on defenders. And you talked about it before. He's also a dangerous player in transition. He's really comfortable bringing the ball up the floor.
Yeah, that's crazy.
7 foot doing that. Oh my God. I wish I had that gene. But he also has elite offensive skills, as I kind of mentioned before. He's comfortable taking people off the dribble, which is something that I was really surprised to see in some of the film I watched, especially at 7 foot, because that's just something, you don't see from a lot of people. But getting into his strength and weight, I already talked about it. It's just, he does not have a big frame at all, so it's hard for me to see him putting on more weight. But only time will tell. When he gets to the league, I feel like he's one of those players where it's just like, you're never going to know until you see him play up against NBA players. So that's my final.
And that you pretty much took the question I had right out of me. But it really is like, in comparison to Jabari Smith and Paolo, is he kind of more of a gamble out of the top three that, we've talked about many times can be seen as extremely interchangeable? And do you think that gamble leads teams to not want to take that risk and him falling all the way maybe 2-3 past Jabari and Paolo?
I do think that he is a little bit of a gamble just because...
And obviously he's going to be good. He'll be able to score a lot, but those defensive, the weight concerns, all that.
I would say he's more of a gamble just because, not even necessarily because of him. Well, it is because of him, but I would say that Paolo and Jabari are just kind of safer bets just because of a physical stand.
I think they're way more NBA pro ready than Chet. But to kind of go back on what you said, I think the biggest thing we can agree on about Chet is he's definitely not going to be a primary center in the league. There's no way he's going to play 30 minutes at just the pure 5. I think I definitely see him way more as a 4. I think for me, watching a ton of Cavaliers games this year and watching Evan Mobley come into the league, both Evan and Chet had a lot of kind of similar flaws that people saw in them, with the slight frame, not a super physical player inside. But we've seen Evan Mobley be arguably the best rookie this year, even arguably an all-star this year. He's blocked a ton of shots. He plays physical inside, but he doesn't foul that much, which is something that I think if Chet can do, will help him play at the 5. But I definitely see him being more of a 4 with the shooting ability, you said.
And I think that honestly all depends on what team he lands on. I mean, I think where he goes is definitely going to depend on who is willing to take a project. Because I feel like while he already has those skills, and I want to hear you guys' input on this, but while he already has those insane skills that are unlike any other big, our team's willing to take that investment? Because I think he'll take a while to be NBA ready, unlike the first 2 guys we have covered on this podcast.
I can go on that first. I think we've seen a lot of players kind of with a similar kind of idea that Chet Holmgren is. Like, we've seen guys like Bol and Thon Maker. Like, they've come into the league. They're like, oh, they've got like these wing and point guard skills and they're 7 foot. But then, they haven't really been able to put that all together a lot of the times because of the team they go to, like you said. But I think that if a team drafts Chet hoping to basically get like a Joel Embiid stopper or a Nikola Jokic stopper at the 5, I feel like they're really going to be disappointed with, the inability of him to just come in and stop these MVP caliber players.
I think Chet here kind of has a benefit because, as they say, the NBA is coming more positionless. Mm-hmm. And so I think that kind of gives them the flexibility to, try a little bit more like new things with him and not have him do even now the new big man's kind of developing this kind of more traditional where they just shoot the 3 and like set screens. But with Chet, he has like a lot more versatility than that. And, he can take people off the dribble. So I feel like he has a wider variety of, things he can do. And I think coaches he's someone where he needs the right coach because they're just going to have to get really creative with him.
And yeah, that kind of leads into my question. Who do you think will be a fit to take him and want to take him for a, position filler? And who do you think can develop him the best out of like all the teams that are kind of struggling right now and need a guy?
Well, looking at the current standings here, Orlando and Detroit both have 12 wins at the time of recording this. But I think I already said this earlier. I would love to see him play with Isaiah Stewart in Detroit, just because I think with Isaiah Stewart defensively, I think that can kind of shade a lot of his physicality, like deficiencies. Because, we all saw earlier this season when Isaiah Stewart was just a menace and he tried to fight LeBron. Mm-hmm. So I think that attitude kind of will help Chet in his defensive development in the NBA.
Yeah, I agree with Jake on that. If he goes somewhere, he needs someone that kind of already has like a paint presence down low a bit. So I feel like Detroit, maybe that could be a good fit, yeah. But I'm looking at the standings here, and I also really like him in Orlando, just because, him being with Mo Bamba's like...
Oh my God.
That would be crazy. My only concern with Orlando is that they have a little bit of issues up at the guard front, but I think with a player like Chet, it could be a situation where, he's just so skilled offensively that those issues just don't matter. But you never know with the NBA. A lot of things can happen.
And even right now, like Indiana, they're playing right now against Cleveland, but they're sitting at 5th in the lottery odds. If they somehow slide into the top 3 and get a chance to take Chet Holmgren to match with like a Miles Turner or a DeMontis Sabonis, like that would be very interesting, because I think both those veteran bigs could show him a lot of the ropes of how to be consistent in the NBA as a big. And both those guys are pretty versatile offensively too, so they could kind of work with Chet a lot on that end.
So what I'm hearing from here is he can basically go anywhere and help anyone.
Yeah. He fits with a lot of these teams. I think this is a good year for him to be in the lottery just because of how many teams here could use a player like him.
We might have bashed him here a little bit, but I do still think he's a good player that you can build around just because he has such a good skill set. So,
God, I'm looking here at 8th, and you have New Orleans, and I'm just picturing like Zion, who needs a center or a big to work with who can space the floor. And like, if they somehow got into the top 3 and matched Chet with Zion, that would just be like must-see TV, I feel like.
Lethal.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I mean, if he pans out right.
If he pans out, which I'm thinking he probably will, but we'll see.
Now, this is really a long shot. But even I'm looking at Portland here, and they're kind of like, because really this the 5th through the 9th pick in this mock draft I'm looking at is all like really close. And Portland, their season's kind of starting to shut down. So if you think about they slide into the top 3 and we get Dame with Chet, I feel like, I'm not saying that would be a championship team, but I feel like that would be a really interesting fit.
So again, any team really fitting in really.
Yeah, I feel like
really
we've talked about like 5 to 6 different teams, and it fits well with them.
But yeah, I would like to also talk about just his efficiency, which is something he leads the NCAA in the effective field goal percentage and true shooting, which like factors in your free throw shooting as well. And I think that is something that NBA scouts do take note of.
Well, yeah, if you're going to live on the perimeter like he has a lot of games this year, he's kind of proving that that's something that it's like worth doing because he's not really kind of negatively impacting the offense. He's actually like having a super positive impact with how efficient he is out there.
Yeah, and it's not even just the scoring too. It's just I really want to play up how much he does defensively too, just because I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but he may be skinny, but he does still provide some sort of presence right there. I will say in the league though, I'm not really sure in how much of that will still kind of have an impact, because even some, I feel like forwards could have their way with him, because I was watching the Paulo versus Gonzaga game, or the Duke versus Gonzaga game, and he was matched up with Paulo a few times, and there were some times where he just absolutely violated him. Yeah. So it's like, I want to be high on him defensively, but at the same time, I just can't help but think about how skinny he is.
I mean, I'm sure Paulo probably would have done the same thing to Evan Mobley last year, and
that is
kind
true.
of look at what he's doing now, and he's seen as one of the best defensive players in the league.
Yeah.
You want to get into some trivia?
Let's do it.
Yes, sir.
Trivia.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the trivia section where I quiz these two gentlemen and test their college basketball and NBA draft knowledge. Week 1, Branden won, and week 2, Jake won by a landslide. Actually, I think they were both
absolute
landslides.
landslide.
They were both landslides, I think. Getting into this one, these questions will be pretty interesting. I've switched it up a bit. These ones are really fun. I was very surprised with these. So let's get right into it. The first question is a multiple choice. You'll have 3 choices, and I'll give them to you. Now, many don't know, but March Madness is such a big event that work productivity loses companies money. Because everyone is focused on the games, roughly how much money do corporations lose due to poor productivity while March Madness games are being played? This is per year, annually. Is it A, $2.7 billion, B, $13.3 billion,
Oh my God.
or C, $8.2 billion? One at a time.
I'm rocking with C.
C,
I feel like-
$8.2 billion?
I'm rocking with that middle option.
Okay.
I'm going to go big or go home. I'm going to go with the biggest one. Was that B?
The B.
13.
Okay, yeah. So it was A, $2.7 billion, B, $13.3 billion, and C, $8.2.
I'll go with the 13 mil.
You're going B, he's
keeping
going
my
C,
answer. I'm keeping my answer.
and it is B.
Let's go.
$13.3 billion. Companies are losing to people slacking watching March Madness. There were some other absolutely absurd stats in here that I think I will save for later, but it is insane. People,
Man, at this point, just make it a holiday.
I know, like seriously, call off a couple days, let the kids go home from school, go watch their favorite players become stars.
I would be down with that.
Same here. Now, number 2. What was the lowest seed to win the March Madness Natty?
Ooh.
That would be
One at a time.
that was the year UConn won. I can't remember. They were like a 9 or 8 seed. One of the two.
Okay. You guys can pick the same ones, by the way. You don't always
Is this
have
multiple
to.
choice?
No, this is just
Okay.
pick a seed. The lowest seed to win a Natty.
Man, you said 8 or 9.
Yeah.
You got to pick one, though.
Oh.
Because I'm probably just going to pick the other one.
Dang.
You guys can pick the same one, but
I'm gonna go with 9. 9 seems right. So
9. I'm picking 8.
8. So 8 and 9. And the answer is 8.
Let's go!
Jake got it again.
I'm nice with the trivia, man.
I helped you with that, bro. Oh my god, bro.
I'm just
Okay,
nice.
okay. Do you know who won?
It was UConn, right?
No, it wasn't. It was actually a different team.
I have no clue who won.
So actually, UConn was number 7. And this team, number 8, was Villanova back in 1985.
Dang.
That's crazy.
Back in 1985, they beat Georgetown, who was ranked number 1 at the time in the national championship, the biggest upset in March Madness history.
Wow.
Well, except for
UMBC.
But yeah, we talked about that last
We
week.
did. Got that point too.
All right, number 3, a follow-up to this one, actually. So knowing that the lowest was the 8th seed, who is the seed above 8 to never win a natty? There is one seed above 8 who has never won a natty. Which team or which one is that? Which seed?
I think since Branden kind of brainstormed it a little bit, gave me a free answer, I'll start this one off. So I'm gonna go with 5.
Okay. Branden? Remember, I'm not forcing you guys to pick different ones, so no one's calling dibs here.
No, I'm calling dibs. I'm picking 5.
That makes me think that it's 5 though. The fact that you said that, I can't. lie.
No.
Oh, whoa. What do you mean? No. It's not 5.
Just pick one.
I'm going 5.
I'm gonna rock with 5 too. I'm gonna trust my gut.
Okay. Well, the answer is 5.
Let's
Yeah.
go!
I was
Yes.
not very good at hiding that. I did a terrible job. Terrible job.
Oh
You
my
guys
gosh.
technically both got it right. Jake's in the lead here still.
Let's go.
We got one left. Well, actually, here, let me tell you. So there's actually 4 teams who have ever won below number 3. And get this, it was 4, 6, 7, and 8, and not 5.
Jeez.
5 is the only team.
Well,
It's just, yeah.
I think 5-12 games are usually like the most
Yeah,
upset, right?
that makes sense because that's usually like the big upset game that happens every year. So,
that's
I think
interesting.
it's got to be a cursed number. It's got to be.
Yeah, there's a correlation.
All right. Now we'll get into the really fun one that I didn't know about that I think it's just because we're really young. But Pro Baseball Hall of Famer Dave Winfield was a multi-sport sensation during his time playing at the University of Minnesota. In fact, he led the Gophers to their first Big Ten basketball title in 53 years and was also named the College World Series MVP. How many teams did Dave Winfield get drafted to?
You can get drafted to more than one
Are
team.
we saying pro teams?
Pro teams.
Or is this like
Oh, the date was, I think, 1972.
I have absolutely no idea, so I'm going to guess 7.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with 3.
3.
That's my final answer.
I should have made this multiple choice as well. So then it would have been, easier to pick a person. Okay, so you did 7. You did 3. The answer is 4.
Oh.
Jake is
Give me that
closer.
one. What?
No.
7 and 3.
Branden guessed,
Oh, wait.
guessed 3.
He guessed 3? Oh,
Yes.
shoot, my bad.
Give
Branden
me
got
that.
that. Branden got
Lucky
that.
dog.
Give me that. Ugh. I'm out.
That's a half
Unfortunately,
point.
though, no, I'll give him the point. But unfortunately, though, Jake still has won this.
It's all right. I'll be back next week.
Yeah, we'll see about
Yes,
that.
I'll be
Sure.
back.
Let me give
I'm
you a
not
little, let me
gone.
give you a little insight. He was picked. 4 teams picked him from 3 different sports. We're talking the San Diego Padres of the MLB, the Atlanta Hawks of the NBA, the Utah Stars of the ABA, and the Minnesota Vikings.
Wow.
This man went everywhere with baseball. And we talk about, who was it? Bo Jackson. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at this athlete. I've never heard of this guy. And it's like, holy cow, are you kidding me?
Look at this athlete.
And he chose baseball, of course. As I said, he was a Hall of Famer, and he ditched everything else. Mm-hmm. He played with 6 teams until 1995.
Must be nice to just be able to pick your poison. What pro sport do you want to play?
He's just like...
I wish that were me.
I mean, that'll never happen again. That's just insane.
If I had the option to drop 50 in the NBA on a nightly basis or hit dingers every day in the MLB, that would just be the dream life.
Would it be a dream or would it be a nightmare? Because you only get to pick one.
I love the adversity, though. But I would make it work. I'd find a way. I'm just different.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for the trivia section, and I think that's going to wrap it up for the podcast.
Yeah, that's going to wrap it up here on episode 3 of League Bound. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Make sure you guys follow us on social media. You can follow me at Jacob Schrantz on Instagram and Twitter.
At bblue_23.
And at Broderick Wilken on Twitter and at Broderick Wilken on Instagram. And Broderick Wilken on YouTube if you want to see that too. Don't forget, we are not only League Bound on Spotify, we are the League Bound podcast on YouTube as well.
Yes, please go subscribe on there. Help grow our numbers. It's really, really helpful.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Y'all stay safe out there.
All right.